Hi James. So now we're looking at Module 3, which is about the governance implications of subcontracting. What does this module cover?
Well, it focuses on governance, but it focuses on two sorts of governance. The governance of the organisation, how is this new contract going to impact on your governance? But also the contract itself talks about governance in terms of how is the contract managed. So the reporting requirements and other governance relationships within the contract. So we're talking about governance in two different ways here.
So who needs to read this module?
Well, we've used governance in two ways. So first of all, those responsible for the internal governance of the organisation, typically the chair, the chief executive, perhaps a company secretary. They're going to have to look very carefully at the governance unless the constitution of the organisation and its governance has been reviewed quite recently and with a view to contracting. The second group of people are those who are going to be delivering the contract, the people working with it day to day, who are going to have a thorough knowledge of the governance process inside the contract.
So why is it important to review your organisation's governance before entering into this kind of contract?
You're taking on new activities. It's absolutely essential that you're clear that they fit within the objects of your organisation. Organisations which are charities are going to have to be particularly careful because organisations like that have their objects very narrowly defined and you can only do something that falls wholly and exclusively within that. Quite often organisations have a history and their objects may reflect that history rather than what they're doing now. So they need to look carefully at that. All organisations need to look at their powers, if they've got the powers to do that. And secondly, you've got to look at the operation of your governance. You've got a board who've got responsibility for running this. Are they up to the job? They're going to need perhaps new skills. There are new worries, new responsibilities. So you need to review that. And finally, you need to consider about delegation. Boards don't meet very frequently. Sometimes they meet 4 times a year. This whole contractual negotiation process is going to be much faster than that. So the board's got to set up formal delegation processes to allow those actually doing the negotiations to make decisions and have the authority to come to them.
So what kind of governance issues does your organisation need to consider?
Really fundamental ones. Does this contract fit with your values? Is it going to impact on your relationship with key stakeholders? And are you an advocacy organisation? This contract has got quite strong confidentiality provisions in it. You may well feel that your advocacy role will be curtailed by entering into the contract. Then there's a separate set of issues that are around limited liability. You want to limit the liability of trustees, so if you aren't already a limited liability organisation, if you aren't a company limited by shares or by guarantee, or a CIO or a KIC, then you're going to want probably to convert if you're taking on a substantial contract. So there are all those issues that are important. You also need to think about protecting the organisation. This can be done perhaps by running the contract through a subsidiary, perhaps a trading subsidiary. That would also allow you to undertake a wider range of activities than you might be able to under a charitable constitution. And finally, you may be either working with others or want to use a special purpose vehicle to run this contract through. What you're looking at is a firewall between you and the liabilities of this contract so that the historically accumulated assets of the organisation aren't at risk from contract liability.
Are there any conflict of interest issues you need to think about?
Well, any operation of an organisation raises these issues, but they're particularly important with large contracts. The Tier 1 and other competitors of yours may be involved in some way. You're going to need to look at the interest that everyone on the board or within the organisation has and put in place proper ways of managing it. If you're a charity, this is going to be particularly important as the Charity Commission is laying a great deal of emphasis on the proper management of conflicts of interest and conflicts of duty. By conflicts of duty, I mean that you may have no financial interest in the contract or in the contract being won by someone else, but you may have a relationship with another organisation, which means you owe them duties as well as the duties you owe to this organisation.
And there are a range of governance issues which are about managing the contract. What do organisations need to consider there?
There are some issues set out in the ISPA already. Unfortunately, it's not very comprehensive and it's quite clear that there's lots more to go in it. So there's a whole schedule which hasn't been completed on governance. But even without that schedule, we know there are some issues you need to tackle. Firstly, it's important to agree exactly what you need by way of information communication. Get that sorted out right at the beginning. And you then need to look at the implications for your organisation. For example, are you able to collect the data required in the timescales required? Do they want that data in a particular format? So that does your IT systems work with their systems? And of course, there's a good practice issue to think about, and that is that this sort of governance works best on good relationships. So who is responsible at your end? Do they have the appropriate authority? And does that person put the time in to build good, trusting relationships with the Tier 1 provider, which will form the basis of strong governance in this contract?